The film you're about to see is a documentary record of the classic Miami to Nassau powerboat race. They call it the world's roughest, and believe me, the 1960 renewal provided proof positive of that. I'm Skip Evlith, and I was there to cover every grueling mile of this punishing, pounding 184-mile white-cap derby. We knew this would be a rough one, even before the fleet began assembling at the DuPont Plaza Hotel docks in Miami. For 3 days, the Gulf Stream had been churned by 15 to 30 knot winds. Small craft warnings were down now, but skies were still murky. A brisk nor'easter was still blowing, and the road to Nassau was paved with whitecaps. This would be a true test of man and boat, nerve and stamina. No place for paper champions here. Because of the rough weather conditions, only 23 of the original 39 entries showed up to accept the challenge of the race. Favorite in the outboard class is the defending champion Bob Cox and his cathedral-hulled Thunderbird. There's Jim Wynn's Aqua Hunter with Aquamatic inboard-outboard drive. Jim's considered a top threat in the under 30-foot class. Here's the high-powered Tookie. At the helm is the veteran Forrest Johnson. And here's Miss Turbocraft, one of the new turbojet boats. We had an unusually wide variety of power represented in the field this year. But it was here at the Bertram Yacht Company that the most exciting story of the 1960 Miami-Nassau race had its beginning. It was the story of a boat with a revolutionary hull design. She was built by Richard Bertram and rushed to completion for this race. Now she was ready for the big test. This was Moppy, developed by Bertram from a design by Ray Hunt. She featured a unique bow-to-transom V hull to give a soft ride and rough going. The strakes, or longitudinal steps, were designed to provide lift and reduce wetted surface. They call this the hydrolift hull. Special rudders, patterned after that of the 266 cubic inch racing hydroplane, were devised to give Moppy the ultimate in maneuverability. The day before the race, she was poised and waiting. Nearby, Bertram and Sam Griffith made a last-minute check of the course they'd follow, while the work crew lowered Moppy into the water. Now all's in readiness. Twin 275 horsepower engines are finely tuned for the big job ahead. So it's downriver to the assembly point. Now we're back at the DuPont Plaza docks. It's early morning on race day, and the start is less than an hour away. Coast Guard certificates required for the offshore passage are issued to the drivers. There are last-minute instructions from race officials. Number 23 jots down some late information and is ready to go. Bahama Seacraft is underway. A catamaran leaves the pier, and I head for my helicopter to catch the fleet at the starting line. The sheltered waters of the Miami Ship Channel are churned by whirling propellers as 23 boats head into the rising sun. Now only seconds away from the start of the first leg of the world's roughest powerboat race, the 184-mile dash to Nassau. First checkpoint is Cat Key, 55 miles away across the Gulf Stream. From there, it's 88 miles over the Grand Bahamas Bank to Fraser Hogg Key. And the final dash to Coral Harbor in Nassau covers 41 miles across the tongue of the ocean. Now they're off in the dash down the ship channel. Moppy quickly shoots to the front as they pass the starting line. She's first to come barreling out of Government Cut into the rough waters of the open ocean. Before today, she'd never run at more than 20 knots and had never been tested in rough seas. How would she take it? Well, Bertram, Griffith, Navigator Carlton Mitchell, and our cameraman down below were quick to find out. Waves were high and the sea heavy, but Moppy proved in a hurry she was in her element, staying on profile in an amazing demonstration of sea-keeping ability. Astern of Moppy came the rest of the fleet. At this point, I turned back and transferred to an amphibian to cover the rest of the race. Back at the scene of action, I picked up the fleet again and found Bob Collier's husky black Caesar taking the rough going in good style. There's Jim Wynn's Aqua Hunter, plunging along at good speed. And still out in front is Moppy, with Sam Griffith, a previous two-time winner of this classic, doing a superb job of driving. Seas are mountainous, and it takes a lot of heart to stand on the throttle under conditions like this. Later, Griffith will get relief at the helm from skipper Dick Bertram. We turn back to see how the other boats are faring. We found them strung out over quite a few miles of ocean. 2 hours after the start, it was already beginning to look like a two-boat race between Moppy and Aqua Hunter. There's Aqua Hunter below us now. She's well ahead of the other boats we've just passed. About 10 miles farther ahead, we found Moppy, steadily increasing her lead. It's interesting to note that both Moppy and Aqua Hunter have full-length V hulls from the Hunt design. With quite a few hundred feet of film already in the can, I flew down to Cat Key to get ready for the action I knew would be coming up there before long. We landed our amphibian and taxied ashore past the docks. Within a few minutes, Moppy came tearing in for a pit stop. She'd made the 55-mile rough water run from Miami in 2 hours and 50 minutes. A 55-gallon drum is quickly taken aboard for refueling underway, and Moppy's off again. Outside the harbor, another of our cameramen on a fast cruiser caught these shots of Moppy as she tore across the Bahamas banks. Back at Cat Key, Jimmy Wynn checked in with Aqua Hunter, 10 minutes behind Moppy. No time to waste here if he hopes to close that gap. We stayed around an hour or so to film the other boats as they arrived for their pit stops. Now we began getting reports of the toll the seas were taking among our entries. Several boats had run into difficulties and had to call for help. Others had found the going too rough and turned back. How many boats were left in the running? Well, at this point, nobody knew for sure. There's Miss Turbocraft, refueled and ready to return to the race. Black Caesar's still in the running and well up in the field. Even though the boats pause here, the race goes on. It's gas up and get going with all speed possible. A few minutes lost at dockside may well be the difference between winning and losing in a close race. Aquasonic checks out. There goes Bob Cox, off chasing the inboards. Through the Virgimere and its radio transmitter, I checked with the Coast Guard and Race Chairman Red Price at Coral Harbor, and then we're off again. We began overtaking boats almost as soon as we hit the open water. Here the water is shallow and the seas are steep, but there are no ground swells. The going is considerably different, but no smoother riding than back in the Gulf Stream. Personally, I'm happy to be riding high and dry in our amphibian. From up here, the sea looks fairly flat, but you can tell how rough it is by the action of the boats and the spray they're throwing. Under conditions like this, performance of the boat, rather than speed alone, is the decisive factor. Moppy's advantage lay in the new hull design, which enabled her to hold her speed under the adverse conditions. Here's the Bahamas Trader, anchored as an intermediate checkpoint 67 miles from Cat Key. Nearby is Northwest Light, marking the edge of the Bahamas banks. We found Aqua Hunter battling it out with the heavy seas over the tongue of the ocean. We flew on to Fraser's Hog Key looking for Moppy, but she was nowhere to be seen. Could we have missed her, or had she met with misfortune? A radio check gave us the answer. Incredible as it was, Moppy had already passed Fraser's Hog Key. We set out to find her, and finally there she was, halfway across the tongue of the ocean and fairly flying herself. Carlton Mitchell had checked his time and discovered that they had a chance for a record. That was all they needed to know. They were running a beam of the sea, but Griffith opened the throttle and Moppy shot ahead with no tendency to roll out her propellers. We flew on over the Coral Harbor Club, where race officials were waiting for the boats to come in. After a totally hectic day, the peace and quiet of the club was a welcome change, but we didn't have long to enjoy it. In a matter of minutes, Moppy came charging into the harbor entrance and across the finish line. She'd averaged better than 50 miles an hour for the last 7 miles. Bertram, Griffith, and Mitchell had made the run from Miami in 8 hours flat, a new race record, and in the worst weather conditions in the history of the race. 2.5 hours later, Jimmy Wynn came in with Aqua Hunter. They were the only boats to finish the first day. Crewing with the bearded Wynn was Bill McKeon, popular editor of Popular Boating magazine. Now I had a chance to enjoy the luxuries of the Coral Harbor Club while waiting for the other boats to come in. I missed the arrival of Bob Cox and his crew. They had come in at 5:15 a.m. the next day to finish first in the outboard class and third overall. Sometime later, the other boats began showing up. There's Black Caesar again. She was closely followed by Tookie. They had tied up at the Bahamas Trader to spend the night. There's a cathedral-hulled craft with aquamatic drive. And this is Mrs. John Rollerson's Mary Jane, competing in the predicted log division of the race. In the final countdown, a total of 13 boats from a starting field of 23 had survived the rigors of the rough seas to finish the race. Skippers and crews are bone-tired, battered and bruised, but in typical sportsman fashion, there's not a man among them who isn't already planning to try it again next year. Rested and relaxed after a good night's sleep, the winner, Dick Bertram, and Sam Griffith proudly display their trophy. But they're quick to admit that most of the credit for their record-smashing run in the White Cap Derby must go to Moppy, the boat that rough seas couldn't lick.